I got a quick question, Rabbi.
Sorry, go ahead, Bryce.
Do you say motzi for pizza?
Do you say motzi for pizza? Um, that's a good question. I'm not sure of the answer, but my guess is the crust is bread-like enough
Yeah, I
so
would
that
think so.
the
Hmm.
answer is probably yes. Actually, one of those books I have behind me has every food you can think of.
I don't
Um,
same for all pizza because I was once in a kosher pizza place that had a sign up saying which blessing their particular pizza was and that it's not the same everywhere.
oh, that's interesting. So I wonder if it was like a different kind of crust,
Yeah,
like
that's the point.
like a
It has,
cauliflower crust or something.
I don't know.
Yeah, a gluten-free. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, interesting question. Okay,
Yeah, if
and
it's gluten free, you wouldn't put them. You wouldn't say a motzi over it.
no, you would not, because it wouldn't contain. Well, actually, I mean, if it, well, I don't know. I can't quite keep the list of grains in
I
mind that I
think
can say motzi on, but I'm not sure.
they've gluten free oats now, and I think oats are hamotzi. So that would
Yeah, I think you're
generally.
right. I think you're right. Yep, yep. Okay, so this is a good segue to our class for this evening, our discussion for this evening, which is Jewish law, halacha, and we talk about this all the time, and I found kind of a nice article, and so let's dive in. I presume you can see it. So this is from Judaism 101, and halacha there's the Hebrew. I think they're going to say it's from the if I were to say I am walking, it would be holech. It's the same root. If he walked, past tense, halach. So it's basically a way of moving, a way of walking. Okay, so would someone like to read what is halacha?
I'll read if no one wants to.
Okay, thank you, Joanne.
All right. Judaism is not just a set of beliefs about God, man, and the universe. Judaism is a comprehensive way of life filled with rules and practices that affect every aspect of life. What do you do when you wake up in the morning? What you can and cannot eat, what you can and cannot wear, how to groom yourself, how to conduct business, who you can marry, how to observe the holidays and Shabbat, and perhaps most important, how to treat God, other people, and animals. This set of rules and practices is known as halacha. The word halacha is usually translated as Jewish law, although a more literal and more appropriate translation might be the path that one walks. The word is derived from the Hebrew rote lamed kaf, meaning to go, to walk, or to travel. Some non-Jews and non-observant Jews criticize this legalistic aspect of traditional Judaism, saying that it reduces the religion to a set of rituals devoid of spirituality. While there are certainly some Jews who observe halakha in this way, this is not the intention of halakha, and it is not even the correct way to observe halakha. On the contrary, when properly observed, halacha increases the spirituality in a person's life because it turns the most trivial, mundane acts, such as eating and getting dressed, into acts of religious significance. When people ask me how to increase their spirituality or the influence of their religion in their lives, the only answer I can think of is observe more halakha, keep kosher or light Shabbat candles, pray after meals or once or twice a day. When you do these things, you are constantly reminded of your relationship with the divine, and it becomes an integral part of your entire existence.
Yeah, let me pause for a second. The idea of spirituality is not such an ancient idea in Judaism. In fact, there is no biblical word for spirituality. The modern Hebrew word for spirituality is ruchaniyot, from the root ruach, which actually can mean spirit or breath. Um, um, so this idea of spirituality per se, I would say, is not really ancient or fundamental to Judaism. I mean, I think this author is taking a slightly different take than I would take on it. But I do agree. Let's read one more paragraph and we can discuss it further. I do agree that the path is observance. So let's read that next paragraph.
Are these laws sometimes inconvenient? Yes, of course. But if someone you care about, your parent, your child, your spouse, asks you to do something inconvenient or unpleasant, something you didn't feel like doing, you would do it, wouldn't you? It is a very shallow and meaningless kind of love if you aren't willing to do something inconvenient for the one you love. How much more so should we be willing to perform some occasionally inconvenient tasks that were set before us by our Creator, who assigned those tasks to us for our own good?
So this reminds me of many times when I meet people, and quite often, in the context of preparing for a wedding or a funeral, and they will speak about themselves or someone else and say, "I'm not religious, but." And I think what they really mean is they're not observant. And so I'd see traditionally Jews measure their religiosity by the degree to which they observe Jewish law. We'll talk more about it, but Stephen.
The problem with this analogy is if you loving someone isn't just doing what they want you to do, it's also not asking them to do stuff that you know they really don't want to do and will find extremely unpleasant unless you've got a very strong reason that you need them to do it. And so then the problem becomes not whether we should be obeying the commandments, but whether God should be giving us some of the commandments at all.
Can you think of a commandment that
well, it's not going to be the same for every person, but the point is, other than there are a few commandments that are truly necessary, like don't kill people, but a lot of the stuff, the only reason that I've ever seen offered for it is because that's what God wants. And the question then is, well, why would God, is it kind of selfish for God to be telling us to do things just because he wants us to do them if he knows we may not enjoy them and that they really isn't any reason for them to be done other than his desire?
Or her desire. So what I would say is, and I know you've all heard me say this before, is I think Reform Judaism focuses or suggests that ethical commandments, which are, I would categorize as the way you treat other people, animals, and the environment, ethical Jewish commandments are binding on all people. Ritual commandments, which would be everything from praying 3 times a day to wearing these funny little hats to keeping kosher to putting up a mezuzah and so on, are really between us and God, and we should decide in which commandments is God really speaking to us. But that certainly is a radical change from traditional Judaism, which would respond by saying, who are we to decide which commandments God is really serious about and not serious about? I don't know if you have anything to add there, Stephen, or you can take your hand down and then
but
go ahead.
Yeah, but the reading that I'm commenting on, it was talking about the ritual ones. It was saying because God loves you and you love God, you should be keeping kosher and lighting Shabbat candles and praying after meals and so forth. These are all ritual ones, and there's a bit of a problem with this analogy that it's giving, in that it's saying we should treat God like we do people we love, even though God doesn't treat us like people who love us.
Oh, well, okay. That's actually opens up an even more interesting element, which would say is if you love someone, would you place requirements on them that they may not understand or may not even agree with? And I'll just comment, and I'm going to call on Ellen and then Bryce. Particularly with the understanding of God as parent, we certainly ask our children to do things that they may not understand, may not appreciate, may not even want to do, but we presumably have a higher reason for asking them to do things. And I would say that's the analogy that that applies here. Whether you agree with God as a parent figure is a whole other issue. And of course, sometimes parents will, that are not very good parents, not very good people, may have asked their kids to do things which are not good at all. Alan.
So I think this article in the part of the discussion which used the word inconvenient gets us off to the wrong start.
Well, it
so
says inconvenient or unpleasant. Just looking
yeah,
at it.
So I think that it kind of distracts me, let's say, from the bigger picture of what halacha is intended, which has to do with the author actually refers to, which is to appreciate the role that God plays in our all these things we do in our lives. Period. That's it. Okay. Now, along the way, the word inconvenient could happen, but that's not a criteria for deciding whether you do it or not. It's whether it makes sense in the bigger picture of. Now, obviously, you're talking to a Reformed Jew who doesn't follow halacha, doesn't believe that the specific list is so absolute. But I do believe that remembering all the time about God has a value, and so maybe I've invented my own, reform version, but the point of inconvenient seems to be out of place. In other words, I don't drive on Shabbat because it's convenient. It's just so forth. So inconvenient and the other word that was used, I think it distracts us from focusing on the value of.
Well, but I think it's honest. I mean, certain things like, you want to turn a light on, you want to turn a television on, you want to use your refrigerator on Shabbat. It's inconvenient to set up everything the night before, tear the toilet paper so you don't have to tear on Shabbat. It's inconvenient. I think it's honest.
That's a kind of, I guess maybe because I make choices not based on convenient. I make it based on having some meaning.
But that doesn't deny whether it is convenient or inconvenient. Okay. Right. Okay, Bryce, and then Erwin.
Yeah, I have, as you well know, Rabbi, I have a struggle here. Or actually multiple struggles. One of which is that I can't conceive of an all-powerful God who can create a universe, and yet it's this one. And it works this way, and that a God who really cares but can't do anything. I can't juggle these irreconcilable concepts well enough to be able to imagine that it's important to try to please a big daddy, and I don't need a daddy.
Okay, I understand that, and you've said that often. And
yes.
I have trouble understanding God too, but that doesn't surprise me. In fact, it would shock me if I thought I really understood God.
Well, my point is not that I do or do not understand God. What I'm talking about is I don't understand a place for God. That's
okay. It. Erwin.
I think I don't understand Stephen's reasoning. I think Halacha has nothing to do with the love of God. God never asked us to love him. God never asked us to love our...
No, stop for a second. God does ask us to love him. The V'ahavta, you shall love Adonai.
The Ten Commandments is divided by 5 and 5.
Right.
The first 5 is between man and God, and the second 5 is between man and man. And the law of Halacha is not only that, it's basically, I feel it's more to keep a tradition than, if you light a Shabbat candle and you don't believe in it, it's, useless. Why are you doing it? And if you don't want to say a blessing before your meal, you don't have to, but you eat the meal anyway. But I feel when I do a blessing and I light a Shabbos candle, it makes me feel good. And
Right.
I do
So
something. Let me finish it.
sorry.
It also a blessing and lighting a Shabbos candle and be good to another person. It elevates my spirituality, and that's the reason.
Right. So actually, your example is an interesting one. If, you know, in a family, if a mother is lighting Shabbat candles, and on a given night, she may not feel like doing it, but it's still important for her family to see her doing it. And so
Yeah.
I'm going to make sort of two comments. One you've heard me say a lot. Let me get that one over. Larry Kushner talks about three different kinds of Jewish laws. You know, category number one, and I think they actually correspond to different Hebrew words for Jewish law. Chok, and I can't remember which ones go with which. But anyway, category number one. Thanks very much. We could have figured this out ourselves. Don't murder, don't steal. Um, you know, treat others the way you want to be treated, and so on. Yeah, we could figure that out. Makes perfect sense. Second group are commandments that we would have never figured out on our own, but now that you've given them to us, they're brilliant. And the best example of that is Shabbat. We would never figure that out, that we dedicate a day, you know, to live in creation rather than change creation. I'm not going to talk about Shabbat, but out of the blue, God, you tell us to do this. Brilliant. We would have never figured it out. The third category are the ones that we still can't figure out. And so you can, you know, the one I always use is shatnez, is not mixing in a garment wool and linen. And Larry talks about that as the sweetest of all. And I always use the example, particularly it was really of my late wife. She loved yellow roses. And so I bought her yellow roses. I don't know why she loved yellow roses, but she loved yellow roses. I love her. I'm going to give her yellow roses. So from that point of view, I would say a traditional Jew would say, God has given me so much. God asked me to do some things I can't figure out. They don't make any sense to me, but I'll do them anyway. Let me make one more comment and I'll call on you, Alan. The other thing, and I always used to talk about this with my bar and bat mitzvah kids, is that the ritual commandments keep us working together as a team. And the example I often use is wearing, you know, like you go to a Lakers game and you're wearing a jersey of your favorite player. Well, do you really think you're on the team and the coach is going to call you in and play the game? No, but you feel more like a member of the team. It is a tribal mentality with all the good and the bad that goes with that. So I would say the ritual things like lighting Shabbat candles, keeping kosher, definitely keeps you working as a team because it forbids you from eating with other people that are not on the team. So I think both historically and currently, some of these rituals just keep us working as a team. And then in my judgment, the real purpose of the team is to make the world a better place. Alan.
First of all, I would replace team with community, but I get this, your point. I like the word community.
Well, but community for me suggests a lot of different people with different backgrounds and everything else working together. Team is a group with which you have a particular identification, and there are people in the team and there are people out of the team, and that's powerful. I mean, just like, you know, people are rooting in the Olympics for their home country. It's powerful. It also has negative elements to it, but there's no question that tribal mentalities are powerful.
Well, the connotation has competition in it, which I prefer the other word, but that wasn't really my reason I raised my hand. It has to do with when you put these categories of things we would have probably thought of ourselves, and others we wouldn't have thought of. And so I'm sort of mulling over the topic of kashrut, okay, because kashrut to me is probably something we wouldn't have thought of,
right?
But it has a lot of value, even if I don't follow it strictly. I'm conscious of in a favorable way of the gift of eating, of being able to eat. Thanks to God. So the concept of appreciating through the rules of eating, dietary laws, I think is something we would not have thought of.
Well, and maybe, well, kashrut we would have never thought of. But you can say blessings and appreciate what you eat before you sit down to a ham and cheese sandwich.
Or
But
shrimp salad. Yeah, of course.
what I think kashrut does is it makes you conscious and makes people around you conscious of your Judaism. And it also has the practical effect, historically, of keeping Jews together with other Jews. The old story, well, again, this is sort of Larry Kushner, I think, telling me, a peddler is traveling across Europe from shtetl to shtetl, and he comes to a village, and of course he's going to go to the synagogue because he has to pray 3 times a day. So they notice here's a new guy in the synagogue, and now there's a mitzvah, haknasat orchim. It is a mitzvah to basically invite people to your house and offer them hospitality. So as people in those days would actually fight over who is going to be able to get the mitzvah of haknasat orchim. But the main thing is you've got to invite this guy over, otherwise he's going to wind up either in outside or maybe at a pub. And if he's at a pub, chances are it's not a kosher pub, so he's not going to be able to eat. So you invite him over, he meets your daughter, and they get married, and Jews are marrying Jews because they can't eat and have hospitality with non-Jews, in a world that keeps strictly kosher. So that's I didn't say a word about spirituality there, but I think it has the practical effect of keeping the tribe together.
And you didn't mention anything that was health related, which I came to believe is that kashrut doesn't have to do with, it has to do with assimilation, the point you're making.
It has to do with resisting assimilation. Yes, I always have a one-word response to people who think kashrut is health related, and that word is schmaltz, which for those of you who don't know Yiddish is chicken fat, which fried chicken fat. I mean, it's almost hard to imagine anything less healthy that doesn't.
I miss it at Passover. My mother, that's how she made matzah brai, and of course I can't do that now.
Yep. Okay, Joanne.
So I just want to say sometimes on Shabbat, like on Saturdays, if I'm not 100% observant and something comes up, I always ask Hashem for forgiveness. And I believe he forgives me. And I go on and I feel good about it because I asked for forgiveness.
Okay. Okay.
I know that doesn't work for everybody, but
Right.
Right.
Okay, so let's move on. I had something else I was going to add, but maybe I'll remember it. Okay.
All right.
Joanne, you want to continue? Sources of halacha.
Okay. Halacha comes from 3 sources: from the Torah, from laws instituted by the rabbis, and from long-standing customs. Halacha from any of these sources can be referred to as a mitzvah, commandment, plural mitzvot. The word mitzvah is also commonly used in a casual way to refer to any good deed. Because of this imprecise usage, sophisticated halakhic discussions are careful to identify mitzvot as being mitzvot d'oraita, an Aramaic word meaning from the Torah, or mitzvot d'Rabbanan, Aramaic from the rabbis. A mitzvah that arises from custom is referred to as a minchag. Mitzvot from all 3 of these sources are binding, though there are differences in the way they are applied.
So this is, and a lot of this discussion, I think, is going to be new to some of you. So there's mitzvot deoraita, mitzvot, and oraita is an Aramaic word for that which is written. Mitzvot d'Rabbanan, which means from the rabbis, and then minchag, a local custom. Okay, so first the commandments from Torah.
At the heart of halacha is the unchangeable 613 mitzvot, commandments that God gave to the Jewish people in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Some of the mitzvot Torah are clear, explicit commands in the text of the Torah. Thou shalt not murder. You shall write words of Torah on the doorposts of your house. Others are more implicit. The mitzvah to recite grace after meals which is inferred from, and you will eat and be satisfied and bless the Lord your God. And some can only be ascertained by deductive reasoning, that a man shall not commit incest with his daughter, which is deduced from the commandment to commit incest with his daughter's daughter.
So I want to, I mean, this to me is really interesting. Basically, the rabbis are asserting that if we use logic, certain commandments that are not in the Torah can be derived from the Torah, and even though they're being derived by the rabbis, they are considered mitzvot deoraita, mitzvot from the Torah.
Some of the mitzvot overlap. For example, when there is a commandment to rest on Shabbat and a separate commandment not to do work on Shabbat. Although there is not 100% agreement on the precise list of 613, there are differences in the way some lists divide related or overlapping mitzvot. There is complete agreement that there are 613 mitzvot. This number is significant. It is the numeric value of the word Torah. Tav equal 400 plus Vav equals 6 plus Resh equal 200 plus He equal 5 plus 2 for the two mitzvot whose existence precedes the Torah. I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods before me. The 613 are often referred to as the Tariag mitzvot because the standard way of writing the number 613 in Hebrew is Tav 400 Resh 200 Yod 10 Gimel 3. The most accepted list of the 613 mitzvot is Rambam's list in the Mishnah Torah. In the introduction to the first book of the Mishnah Torah, Rambam lists all of the mitzvot, then proceeds to divide them up into subject matter categories.
So I'm going to pause for a second, and we're certainly not going to go through this, but I'm going to click on the link. Actually, they suggest look at this link of list of the 613. So I presume you can see this where it says a list of 600. Okay, so I'm just going to sort of go down, and here it's Tarag mitzvot. So as Joanne said, if you write the number 613 in Hebrew and then try and pronounce it, you'll get Tarag. So here is, I'm just going to scroll down. So commandments concerning God, and he is whoever prepared this did a really nice job, because the preparer, I assume it's a man, but maybe not, is going to go into the Torah and tell you where to find it. So there's 10 of them about God. There's a bunch about Torah. There's a bunch about signs and symbols. There's circumcision and tefillin and mezuzah, prayer and blessings, reading the Shema, grace after meals, love and brotherhood. There's a lot. The poor and unfortunate, not to afflict orphans, widows, leaving corners of the field, and so on. Treatment of non-Jews, of Gentiles, marriage, divorce, and family, forbidden sexual relations. I'm curious as to whether, I don't know that they'll do with one's daughter. Yeah, okay, it's not explicitly in the Torah, but is learned from another commandment. Times and seasons, dietary laws, business practices, employees, servants, vows and oaths, Sabbath and Jubilee years. And some of these commandments, like letting the land lie fallow, only apply in the Holy Land. The court and judicial procedure, a lot of them, wow. Injuries and damages, property rights, criminal law, punishment and restitution, prophecy, idolatry, a lot on that. Oh, look at that, isn't that interesting? There's a lot. I'm scrolling up and scrolling down on idolatry. I haven't really studied this. Agriculture, clothing, the firstborn. So a lot of this stuff with the firstborn and, Kohanim and Levites don't really apply anymore. There are a few that apply to, modern times, but basically, a lot of these are really applying only in temple times, and there's a lot of them. Tithing, we're getting down there. The temple, so this is clearly only applying to a time when there is a temple. And sacrifice and offerings, a lot in there about offering sacrifices. I don't know if there's another category. A lot. ritual purity and impurity. We talk about that a lot. Lepers and leprosy, the king, the Nazarites, someone who takes a vow of a Nazir, wars. You're not allowed to sell a beautiful woman taken captive in a war. I should make a note of that. Okay, so that's the 613 commandments. I've studied a lot in Judaism. I've never actually been exposed to the list, so I thought I would expose you to the list. Bryce.
Yeah, I thought was interesting is that people don't agree on what all of them are. Okay, but in other words, people disagree on what the individual ones are. I mean, that's what we just read, right?
Yes, and I think that
I'm just
there's complete agreement that there are 613. I actually don't think that's necessarily true. It is certainly a tradition to
yes.
call it 613, and the way we tie our tzitzit on a talus has to do with 613. But yeah, so like.
Well, I wanted to make a point, and that would be if the precise number must be 613 because that makes it a magic number from God, and therefore we have the number is significant and so forth. If there was 614, I have trouble believing that the Torah becomes invalid.
No,
okay?
no. Yeah, I'm absolutely with you.
Thank you.
What I would say is it has become traditional, certainly since the time of Rambam, which is 1,000 years, and maybe even longer, that the number is 613. And so we sort of force the numbers into 613. In a way, it reminds me of, this year, which is coming to a close in a couple of months, is 5784. And there's universal agreement among Jews that it's the year 5784. But my understanding is the way that number was derived is if you read the Torah carefully, and it says, well, you start with creation, and then Adam lives a certain number of years, and then the other guys live a certain number of years. My understanding is that there really is ambiguity in that counting.
Well, what's interesting from what you say is, I come from a Christian origin, and what they call it is counting the begats.
Yeah, counting the begats and the years in the begats. So I never checked this, nor do I intend to. But if some person lives this many years and then dies this many years and lives this many years and dies, and you add it all up, you will come to a number. But my understanding is that the Torah, surprise, surprise, isn't sufficiently precise that you can be certain that it's the year 5784, but it's a convention, which actually we're going to discuss that when we get to Minchag. Alan and then Stephen.
So we believed, or my understanding of Jewish history, is that these 613 laws were considered in place until the temple was destroyed, right? So there wasn't that kind of ambiguity. The sacrifices were listed, and there was sacrifices. My question has to do with rabbinic Judaism. So
yes,
the leaders had to make an evaluation, or chose to make an evaluation after the destruction. And in the categories you just made, those the 100 or so, I didn't check the numbers, but say there's 100 of the 613 are sacrificial, and they were set aside until the creation of the temple. Again, that's the
restoration. Yes.
And, okay, so now of the remaining ones, according to rabbinic Judaism, are all of the remaining ones considered halacha or obligatory?
So yeah, but I want to be precise about terminology, and we're going to get into this.
Okay.
The 613 are the rabbis asserting what's in the Torah, and that assertion is by the rabbis. So, for example, the clearest example I can think of, which was already mentioned, is in the Torah, actually in Leviticus 18, which is actually what we're reading in our Saturday morning Torah study at Temple Adat Elohim. A man is prohibited from having sex with his granddaughter. Okay? But it's not written in Leviticus 18 or anywhere else that a man is prohibited from having sex with his daughter. So what the rabbis say is they use a principle of interpretation called kal v'chomer. If you're prohibited from having sex from someone who is distant from you, like a granddaughter, certainly you're prohibited from having sex from a closer relation, like a daughter. And they're actually counting that as one of the 613. So basically what you have here, which I think is somewhat tenuous, is the rabbis asserting that things that we don't clearly see in the Torah are actually in the Torah by logical inference. And what I would say is, you use the phrase until the destruction of the temple. What a traditional Jew would say is the oral law was given to Moses on Sinai 3,200 years ago, before the Torah temple was even built. So a traditional Jew would say those interpretations didn't just take place once the temple is destroyed. But we're also going to see a discussion of mitzvot Rabbanan, and we'll see that difference. So anyway, I hope that.
I'm not sure you're answering my question about rabbinic Judaism. You're helping me understand how rabbinic Judaism and the Talmud helps interpret the laws, but in terms of is everything, did they consciously say, well, we can't do the sacrifice? Is there anything else they just said we couldn't do?
Yeah, what they say is an eye for an eye doesn't apply.
It did apply when there was a temple?
We don't know. But traditional Jew would say that in the Mishnah, in the oral law, you have the seeds for basically doing away with the concept of an eye for an eye, and making it financial restitution. But we're going to see mitzvot Rabbanan. I think one of the examples, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong, nowhere in the Torah does it say you light Shabbat candles. Nowhere in the Bible does it say you light Shabbat candles. But yet the blessing that we say is Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. We're saying God commands us to light Shabbat candles, and I think that's in this. I think that's considered deoraita, but the article will clarify it.
Are you sure that it's candles in the Hebrew? I thought.
No, of course it's ner. It's ner. It's ner. Yeah, it's definitely not candle. Yes. Go ahead, Stephen.
Okay.
Is that what was that? Go ahead.
No, I should have hand up for something else earlier. Okay, I think the number 613 goes back to Talmudic times, and Rambam was the first to enumerate 613. That earlier had been stated that there were 613, but without listing them. And the thing I don't get about the Bagats, about doing the counting to figure out the however many thousand years, is it only gives the ages as an integer. It doesn't say whatever years and 11 months and 14 days, let's say. So there's a 1 year span of when it could be, and if it's rounding off to the nearest integer, then half the time up, half the time down, it'll average out about right, but not exactly. If it's consistently rounding down or consistently up, then it's going to be way off.
Stephen, I already said it, that it's not precise. And it's not precise for lots of reasons. I hadn't thought about that one, but that's a good one. Erwin.
Didn't you taught us that the talit on the tzitzit has the not 613 numerical value?
There is a strained way of leading to 613 with the nuts.
Exactly.
So what I would say is, for a very long time, I don't think it's initially with Rambam, but for a very long time, it was accustomed to understand that there are 613, and it's going to get even more detailed. So, Joanne, would you like to continue reading? There is complete agreement?
Yes. There is also complete agreement that these 613 mitzvot can be subdivided into 248 positive mitzvot and 365 negative mitzvot. Positive mitzvot are commandments to do something, such as the commandment to honor your mother and father. In Hebrew, these are called mitzvot aseh. commandments to do. Negative mitzvot are commandments not to do something, such as the commandment not to murder. In Hebrew, these are called mitzvot lo ta'aseh, commandments not to do. The Talmud explains that these numbers have significance. There are 365 days in the solar year and 248 bones of the human male body. Makot 23b. Note in the Hebrew term translated as bones includes some additional body parts, which explains the discrepancy from modern medicine's count of 206 bones.
213.
Ancient
So,
Ancient sources also indicate that there are 365 sinus in the body and a significant 240-day cycle of the moon. So both numbers have both anatomical and astronomical significance.
sorry. Okay. And here we go. Many.
Okay. Many of these 613 mitzvot cannot be observed at this time for various reasons. For example, a large portion of the laws relate to sacrifices and offerings, which can only be made in the temple and which does not exist today. Some of the laws relate to theocratic state of Israel, its king, its Supreme Court, and its system of justice, and cannot be observed because the theocratic state of Israel does not exist today. In addition, some laws do not apply to all people or places. Agricultural laws only apply within the state of Israel, and certain laws only apply to Kohanim or Levites. The 19th, 20th century scholar, Rabbi Israel Meir Kagan, commonly known as the Chafetz Chaim, identified 77 positive mitzvot and 194 negative mitzvot, which can be observed outside of Israel today.
So that ought to be a big relief. You don't have to worry about 613. But I do think actually even some of these laws, I recall reading an article about ethical laws of the way Israel conducts its wars. And they will actually look at some of these rules about how a king conducts a war and what permissions a king needs to get in pursuing a war. And they apply it to modern warfare ethics. Okay, let's look at mitzvot de Rabbanan. Are you okay to continue reading?
Yes, I'm good. In addition to the laws that come directly from Torah, Halacha includes laws that were enacted by the rabbis. These rabbinic laws are still referred to as mitzvot, even though they are not part of the original 613 mitzvot doreta. Mitzvot de Rabbanan are considered to be as binding as Torah laws, but there are differences in the way we apply laws that are doreta and laws that are Rabbanan. Mitzvot de Rabbanan are commonly divided into three categories: Getzera, Takana, and Minchag.
Yeah, so just to get the pronunciation right, Gezerah, Takana, and Minchag.
Okay.
Gezerah.
A gezerah is a law instituted by the rabbis to prevent people from accidentally violating a Torah mitzvah. We commonly speak of a getzerah as a fence around the Torah. For example, the Torah commands us not to work on Shabbat, but a getzerah commands us not to even handle an implement that you would use to perform prohibited work, such as a pencil, money, a hammer, because someone holding the implement might forget that it was Shabbat and perform prohibited work. The word is derived from the root Gimel Zayin Resh, meaning to cut off or to separate.
So one of the things I remember vividly when my first visit to Israel, I was invited to Shabbat dinner by an Orthodox rabbi. And I think I asked somebody, what should I do? What should I bring? And so on and so on. And, in addition to, not bringing food because they wouldn't be necessarily kosher, you can bring flowers, it was fine. But they said, be careful not to have a pen in your pocket, because that is, and don't ask me how I remember this, it's called muksa. So having a pen in your pocket isn't violating Shabbat, but using it would be violating Shabbat. And to this day, I'm actually very conscious of when I lead Shabbat services, I don't want to be wearing this little, cell phone thing, because it's something that, if used, would be violating the Sabbath. So that is a gezerah. Okay, now next line. Some takanot.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
I think, were we one above, or I think, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
we're here. Yeah.
Okay. A takana is a rule unrelated to biblical laws that was created by the rabbis for the public welfare. For example, the practice of public Torah readings every Monday and Thursday is a takana instituted by Ezra. The mitzvah to light candles on Hanukkah, a post-biblical holiday, is also a takana. The word is derived from the Hebrew root tav kof nun, meaning to fix, to remedy, or to repair. It is the same root as tikkun olam, repairing the world or making the world a better place, an important concept in all branches of Judaism. Some takanot vary from community to community or from region to region. For example, around the year 1000 CE, a Rabbanu Gershom Meor Hagolah instituted a takana prohibiting polygamy, multiple wives, a practice clearly permitted by the Torah and the Talmud. The takana was accepted by Ashkenazic Jews who lived in Christian countries where polygamy was not permitted, but was not accepted by Sephardic Jews who lived in Islamic countries where men were permitted up to 4 wives.
And I think I've mentioned here, Sonia's from Morocco, and she knew Jewish men who had more than one wife. I think I don't know if it's probably still permitted in Morocco. It is not permitted in Israel. Israel does not allow polygamy.
Nor in
Okay.
America,
Sorry?
nor anymore in America, although it was allowed among the Mormons until not too long ago, actually.
Okay. Minchag.
Minchag is treated as a category of mitzvot d'Rabbanan from the rabbis, mostly because it is clearly not dorei ta from the Torah, but minchag is generally not the sort of rule that is created by reasoned decision-making. A minchag is a custom that developed for worthy religious reasons and has continued long enough to become a binding religious practice. For example, the second extra day of holidays was originally instituted as a getzerah so that the people outside of Israel, not certain of the day of a holiday, would not accidentally violate the holiday's mitzvot. After the mathematical calendar was instituted, and there was no doubt about the days, the added second day was not necessary. The rabbis considered ending the practice at that time, but decided to continue it as a minhag. The practice of observing an extra day had developed for worthy religious reasons and had become customary.
Yeah, that's a great example of a minchag. And I would say, second day of Passover is still widely celebrated. Second day of Rosh Hashanah is still widely celebrated. In the Reform movement, they definitely got rid of the second day. Alan.
I found one point John read was about the timing. So I never thought about the fact that there was a step in the understanding of mathematic calendaring that the rabbis evaluated. Around what century or time period did that get reevaluated?
I don't know, but basically the issue is understanding with precision the phases of the moon, because the Hebrew calendar is based on the phases of the moon, and in the tradition, the moon had to actually be physically observed in Jerusalem, and then the word went out. So for most holidays that occur on the 15th of the month, there was plenty of time to get the word out throughout the land of Israel, but not to Alexandria, Egypt, and Greece and other places. So they would have a second day, so to make sure that at least on one of those days we were observing it correctly. Interestingly, even in Israel, so in Israel today, in the Orthodox world, there is no second day of those holidays. There's only one night of Passover, only one Seder. But even in Israel, there are 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, because once the moon appears on Rosh Hashanah, you can't light bonfires, you can't send messengers, you're already there. So in Israel, they still celebrate 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. In the Reform movement, we technically only celebrate 1 day, but many Jews celebrate 2 days.
Yeah, the Rosh Hashanah is an interesting one in Israel. The other one that I came to learn is for holidays has to do with walled cities in Israel. Like Purim is celebrated 2 days.
Yeah,
That isn't.
yes.
That's not connected to. Yeah. I'm asking. I shouldn't say it. I'm asking that walled city rule. How does that connect to halacha in the Torah?
So it comes from the book of Esther, as does the entire story of Purim, because in Shushan there was a second celebration, and Shushan is a walled city.
But there are other rules that fall, and it's not just. I mean, there's only 6 or 8 walled cities that this applies to, but
and
it's
the
not just
rule is they had to be a walled city in the time of Joshua.
good point. But I think there's some other rules that are more than just related to Purim. I don't remember what they are offhand.
Yeah, I am sure you're right. We're very big on rules. Stephen.
Shavuos wasn't a fixed day of the year. It was whenever you finish counting the Omer. So as long as you knew
No. Shavuot is like the 6th day of Ayar or something. It's
Sivan, but that's not the point.
Sivan, yeah, sorry.
It's in Sivan, but it's a certain number of days after.
Yeah, there's a big argument in the Talmud, and the answer is they come up with the 6th day of Sivan. But it's a big argument. It can be ambiguous as to when you start counting the Omer, and you count 49 days.
What I'm saying is it's now the 6th day of Sivan consistently, but because it's of the way it, but I believe prior to the fixed calendar, it was done based on the Omer, and it wouldn't always fall on the same day of Sivan every year. And as long as you knew when Rosh Chodesh Nisan was, that told you by how it being however many days after however many
you are
days
summarizing. Stephen, you're summarizing a long argument in the Torah, and I mean in the Talmud. Sorry, not the Torah.
My question is, why would Sivan need to be 2 days? Because as long as you knew when Rosh Chodesh Nisan was, even if you didn't know how many days Nisan and Iyar ended up being.
Because the answer is you don't know how many days. The answer is you determine the first day of every month, according to tradition, by physical observation of the new moon in Jerusalem. You may not like that answer, but that's the answer.
Yeah. No, I'm saying Shavuos specifically is determined by when the new moon of Nisan was 2 months earlier, and you should have enough time to find out when that was, if you don't know when.
You have the right to argue with the sages of the Talmud, but on matters of halacha, they come to a decision, and that's the decision. You can argue with that decision, as you can argue with anything. That's fundamental right of being Jewish. Bryce.
Yeah, it's minor and insignificant and not really noticeable, but it is a technical truism, or true. It's actually technically true. The moon is slowing down. Yes. Very brief. The moon's orbit. In fact, the moon used to be faster and is getting slower and will continue to get slower, and the months will change.
Yes, and I actually think even in Judaism that they acknowledge that, and there's an adjustment, but I believe that's true. I'm not 100% sure. I really would like to finish this article. So let's talk about the word minchag is used.
All right. Well, I think first it is important to note that these customs are a binding part of halacha, just like a mitzvah, a tanakah, a takana, or a gezerah. Gezerah. The word minchag is also used in a looser sense to indicate a community or an individual's customary way of doing some religious thing. For example, it may be the minchag in one synagogue to stand while reciting a certain prayer, while in another synagogue, it is the minchag to sit during the prayer. It may become an individual's minchag to sit in a certain location in synagogue or to walk to synagogue in a certain way, and under appropriate circumstances, these two may become minchag. Even in this looser sense, these customs can become binding on the individual. It is generally recommended that a person follow his own personal or community minchag as much as possible, even when visiting another community, unless that minchag would cause the other community discomfort or embarrassment.
Let me ask a question some of you may know this. For the observance of Kol Nidre at Temple Adat Elohim, does that begin with does the chanting of Kol Nidre have the cantor walk in from the back of the synagogue chanting Kol Nidre?
No.
No. So Michael Anatol started this.
Yeah,
And it
you
was a minchag when he was doing it because his mother told him that that's the way it was done at their synagogue. So he started doing it, and it was beautiful. And after about 10 years or so, his mother said, you know, that it wasn't Kol Nidre, it was something else. But everybody loved it so much that they continued doing it that way.
But in my temple here in Beth Am, I know for Rabbi Martyr did the same thing. Maybe she got it from Michael Anatol, but
maybe, who knows? and there's one other joke, and it is, you know, in Reform Judaism, the Shema has taken on a particular significance. So the actual law is when a community recites the Shema, they should not either stand up or sit down. But if they were standing, they stand. If they were seated, they sit. But in Reform Judaism, it's become the tradition to stand for the Shema. So they tell a story about a new rabbi in a Reform synagogue, and that it's time for the Shema, and all of a sudden, you know, half the people are standing up, half the people are sitting down, and then they start arguing with each other. And the people that are sitting are saying, you guys shouldn't be standing up. The traditional way is we should remain seated. You're violating the rules. And the people that are standing are screaming at each other, screaming at the other guy, saying, no, no, no. In Reform Judaism, the special significance of the Shema is we stand up. And the new rabbi turns to the retiring rabbi who's seated next to him and says, quick, tell me, what's the minchag? What's the custom in this synagogue? And he points to the congregation and says, that's the minchag.
All right,
Oh, okay, let's close it with the difference between Torah law and rabbinic law.
As we have seen, Jewish law includes both laws that come directly from the Torah, either expressed, implied, or deduced, and laws that were enacted by the rabbis. In a sense, however, even laws enacted by rabbis can be considered derived from the Torah. The Torah gives certain people the authority to teach and to make judgments about the law. So these rabbinical laws should not be casually dismissed as merely the laws of man, as opposed to the laws of God. Rabbinical laws are considered to be as binding as Torah laws, but there are differences in the way we apply laws that are d'oraita from the Torah and laws that are d'Rabbanan from the rabbis. The first important difference is a matter of precedence of d'oraita takes precedence over d'Rabbanan. If two d'oraita rules come into conflict in a particular situation, rules of precedence are applied to determine which rule is followed. However, if a d'oraita rule comes into conflict with a d'Rabbanan rule, the d'oraita rule, Torah rule, always takes precedence. Do we fast on Yom Kippur when it falls on Shabbat? These are both d'oraita, so rules of precedence must apply. Specific rules take precedence over general rules, so the specific rules of Yom Kippur fasting takes precedence over the general rule of Shabbat joy, and yes, we fast on Yom Kippur on Shabbat. However, the other fasts on the Jewish calendar are d'Rabbanan, so the d'oraita rule of Shabbat joy takes precedence, and other fasts that fall on Shabbat are moved to another day.
So, for example, the rule of fasting on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, fasting of the fast of Esther, the day before Purim. There's a fast the second day of Rosh Hashanah, I think.
You think of it's the third. You're thinking of the fast of Gedalia, which is the third day.
Third day. Yeah, and so those are rabbinic rules. So if they fall on Shabbat, we delay the fast one day.
Except for Esther's moved earlier, not later, because
okay, you might be right.
So you're not fasting on Purim.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, the second important difference.
The second important difference is the strictness of observance. If there is doubt in Hebrew safek in a matter that is d'oraita, we take the strict position in Hebrew machmir regarding the rule. If there is doubt in a matter that is d'Rabbanan, we take the lenient position in Hebrew makil regarding the rule. In Hebrew, this rule is stated safek d'oraita l'chumra, safek d'Rabbanan l'kula. This is easier to understand with an example. Suppose you are reading the morning prayers and you can't remember whether you read Baruch Hu and Shema, two important prayers. You are in doubt, safek. The recitation of Shema in the morning is a mitzvah of Derata, a biblical commandment. So you must be machmir. You must go back and recite Shema if you are not sure whether you did. The recitation of Baruch Hu, on the other hand, is a mitzvah of Darabanan, a rabbinic law, so you can be makil. You don't have to go back and recite it if you are not sure. If you are certain that you did not recite either of them, then you must go back and recite both. There is no doubt, so no basis for leniency.
Okay, and there's a couple of other articles, so I'm going to stop sharing. I did not look at what people put in chat.
So, Rabbi, when you were speaking about coming in from the back during a cert, that was reminding me actually of a way like of welcoming. It's reminding me of Lecha Dodi in a way. You understand?
Yeah. I mean, it was quite beautiful. So the way it worked with Michael Anatol was he would not be on the pulpit because there's some liturgy before you actually chant Kol Nidre. But then when we started chanting Kol Nidre, he would enter from the back, and it was very dramatic, and we were all standing. So the theatrics were, and he insisted that it was, a minchag. Well, he insisted that he got it from his mother, but the interesting thing is that it became a minchag of the congregation, even though there was no basis for it. Which and I guess now they've done away with it. But since Michael's time, I have been in other synagogues on every high holiday, so every Yom Kippur. Okay, Alan, yeah. So just general discussion at this time.
To reinforce this phenomena of the specific one about Rabbi Cantor Anatol, is that I've been through processes where a new rabbi comes and the congregants become upset because even though the person doesn't know how far back that custom changed, it becomes
Right.
halakha that's the wrong word, but it becomes so important that the new rabbi has to deal with, if the rabbi wants to, and I know in some cases where that's happened, has to, work through with the congregant, not thinking that, this was just a heresy, just
Right.
it's like.
And even on I go around and I do services in lots of places around the country, around the world, and I will try and ask, like so on Shabbat, in some synagogues, they will have a kiddush early in the service. In other synagogues, it will be after the service is over. We're in the oneg room, and they pass out a little wine, and we do the kiddush. So I think because I'm a visiting rabbi, people are more patient with me. But again, you always want to know what the custom place is.
And part of it makes the participant comfortable. The routine plays a role in getting something out of the worship experience, and so the minchas play that role in a way that if you move the blessing for the wine from the beginning to the end, which is not an uncommon shift, that's one of the good example where that happens enough that you can really find congregants upset.
Yes. And remember, in traditional Judaism, we don't vary anything at all. In the Reform movement, we have alternate readings, and we have all kinds of interesting things to do. In traditional Judaism, it's exactly the same, except for specific holiday prayers and so on.
In an Orthodox synagogue on a Friday night Shabbat, given the role of Shabbat dinner and blessings, are the candles and the wine also blessed in the worship service itself?
In a traditional synagogue?
Yeah.
Never.
No, okay.
Because, yeah.
So this becomes a conservative or a non-Orthodox, better way to word it. But then that practice of bringing it into the worship service it was by, I'm going to say conservative and reform.
Yeah, because many people weren't lighting candles. I want to just point out what I'm going to do next time is something different. I'm going to do a screen share again. Is something I think I hope you'll find interesting. Is we're going to look at the platforms of the reform movement. I know, Alan, you'll like this because this is something you're interested in.
I'll get my shrimp out, get ready for it.
Yeah. So and I already worked on the email that I'm going to send, and I'll include this page as a link. So in the reform movement, there have been statements of what is Reform Judaism and what are the principles. In 1885, in 1937, 1976, 1997, and 1999. And they've changed dramatically in terms of what is Reform Judaism. And some of us, I know, Alan, you were probably, you remember this. I don't know if other people remember when Richard Levy of blessed memory, who was the author of the last one of my teachers, would go around to many synagogues with the list and we'd be having discussions of the list and getting input before the CCR actually voted on them.
One favorite picture of him on the Reform Judaism magazine was wearing tefillin, illustrating.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, I hope you'll find it interesting. I hope you found this discussion of halacha interesting. Particularly, I would say, I certainly never heard the term mitzvot d'oraita, mitzvot d'Rabbanan, these terms. So I hope you found that interesting, and I wish you a good week. We will be on Monday. We'll be continuing with the discussion of the Amidah. On next Wednesday, we'll start the discussion of these reform platforms. And those of you that know Henry from Saturday morning and other classes should know we had a very nice conversion. We had a mikveh in Lake Yosemite in Merced, and we also brought a new Torah scroll to the congregation. So it was a very busy weekend, and I was delighted to be there for that. So
Thank you.
I will wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, actually, I can wish you
Good night,
Shabbat
everyone.
Shalom. You can actually start wishing someone a Shabbat Shalom on Wednesday, because you're closer to the next Shabbat than you are further away from the last Shabbat. So technically, people will say Shabbat Shalom on Fridays all the time.
So that's
But
not just in Israel, is what you're saying.
Sorry?
It's not just in Israel. You can do it anytime. You can do this Shabbat Shalom after Wednesday morning. Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't know what time.
I heard the
But most people will look at you like you're crazy. But
not in Israel, but the part that I had added to it, and tell me if this is wrong, is you can do it when you're not going to see the other person again.
oh, I never heard that, but that makes sense. Yeah, never heard it, but it makes sense.
Again, before Shabbat. I don't mean ever
Yeah.
again.
It could be a minchag. You know, they tell a story. I'll keep it on recording. They tell a story of a family that, for some strange reason, whenever mom would cook a brisket, she, before serving it, would cut off the end of the brisket. And, it was like Tevya. It's a tradition. I don't know what it's from. And, but they always did it. And they figured, I don't know, maybe it's related to circumcision. Who knows what it is, but they would always do it. And then they asked the oldest person in the family, maybe grandma's sister or somebody, maybe it was even grandma. And she said, no, when she had a pot, and when she bought a brisket big enough for the whole family, the entire brisket couldn't fit in it, so she had to cut off the end of it and cook it separately. So you never know. So on that happy note, I will wish you a good evening and look forward to seeing you Saturday, Monday, or Wednesday. Take care.
Good evening. Thank you.
Okay. Toda, Rabbi.
Anybody here Canadian?
Thank you for reading.
You're welcome.